Well, moving on to the next session, and now we're going to have a little bit of an insight into the herd improvement, and specifically the semen part of our industry, and this is the Semen Market Survey. Excuse me. This is going to be a panel session, and the facilitator of the panel is Anthony Shelly. Anthony is the Chief Executive Officer of Genetics Australia. He's had a professional career in herd and genetic improvement across both dairy and beef industries for the past 25 years. 7 years, Anthony's been the CEO of the GA Group, and the GA Group consists of not only Genetics Australia, but also incorporating Total Livestock Genetics. Also, beyond his day job, Anthony is currently a director of Agri-Gene and also happens to be chair of NHIA. So a very busy schedule. Joining him in the panel with a tremendous amount of experience, Paul Douglas. Paul is the Business and Development Resource Manager for STgenetics Australia. Paul's had extensive experience in the animal genetics world, primarily focused on the dairy industry. Every now and then he wanders into the sheep and on wool, so it gives him a little bit of diversity on there. I think one of the things of people knowing Paul is he's always chasing data, interpreting in data to see how to get the best results from that information. So Paul brings an incredible amount of experience there. And Rob Derksen's another panel member. Rob has a career spanning many decades in the animal breeding industry. Goes back to one of our questions on Tuesday night, VAB, Victorian Artificial Breeders, in the 70s, has been a product manager there, and now is heavily involved in the export of genetics from Australia to a number of countries around the world, and has invested both the company and himself very extensively there, and also at one stage, through his role with NHIA, sits on our what we call ragtag, and was also a member of HISIC. For a couple of people in the room remember that wonderful organisation that actually contributed a lot, though Matt has a lot to answer for the HISIC being the term of it's called. And the last member of the panel is someone, Chris McIlroy, who's the General Manager of Agri-Gene. Chris is way too modest in terms of when he's provided a bio, because he's been a 30-year contributor to this industry in both dairy and beef, and has had a wealth of experience, travelled the world, and also is provided many wonderful genetics both in the beef and dairy to the industry. So I'll welcome Anthony first up, and then the panel members will join. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Graham, and absolute pleasure to be here. Already got my first finger sign from the crowd, which makes me feel very much at home. Today I'm here representing NHIA. As Graham mentioned, it's the Semen Market Survey that is just recently been released. I'm going to run through just what we're going to do. I'm going to run through a few slides first up. Then we're going to do a little bit of a Q&A with the guys on the panel here. The Semen Market Survey is something that was initiated through NHIA some 10 years ago. It had traditionally been run within the financial period. The participants of the survey, which are predominantly the semen supply companies that are represented here, decided that they would best see that information in a calendar year. So this is actually the second set of data we see in a calendar year. Not a great deal of changes, but I think it does become more reflective information for industry, seeing it that we do cover both of the breeding seasons within the single data set. So here we go. These are the participants that have supplied information, and I really do want to emphasise the importance of participation in this survey. It's not always a really easy task for the supply companies because particularly this year, as you'd appreciate, the data we're looking at is the 2022 data, and it's been a relatively quick turnaround to be able to produce the information for today's session. But this is the formal release. There will be some media releases that follow today's session that will talk a little bit more in depth about some of the findings of the survey. Here's the main graph. This is the graph that many of you would have seen over many years, emphasising again the last 2 years are calendar year periods. I think the most interesting thing there straight up is we see a decline year on year from 2021 to 2022 of just on 109,000 units of semen, which represents around about 5% of the survey information. It's as a top line level, a top line number that does appear, somewhat concerning. But however, I've just flicked to the next slide, and the next slide actually takes out any of the export input that's on these sales. So these are sales that are purely made within our domestic market, made up of a combination of imported semen and domestic semen. The shortfalls, not quite as significant as what it was in the previous slide. And there's a reduction of around about 57,000 units year on year. And I guess, we will have a little bit more comment about it, but linking back to our previous session, that's made up, offset, I should say, by about 31,000 units of increase of beef on dairy semen. So overall, there has been a slight decrease in the units made. The next table is a table of the breed representation. I do want to emphasise that this table does include all semen sold both domestically and internationally, as in export. So you do see a couple of variations there that probably don't quite make logical sense, and I do highlight the Aussie red one there particularly. I mean, the table suggests there's been a decrease of around 35%. Rob might have a comment on that a little bit later on, but I would suspect that the majority of that decline year on year is more to do with export markets than what we've experienced within our domestic markets. A graph we've been keen to look at year on year. The very top graph is the use of genomic semen, and we've seen a continual increase year on year. Similarly, on the bottom line is the daughter-proven usage, and again we've seen a decrease as we've moved through. I'm not going to speak to these in a great deal of depth, by the way, as we go through, if you've probably noticed, because we're going to really, drill into a little bit of this with a few of our panel questions. Doses of conventional semen, again, that trend is continuing. We are using less conventional semen as a proportion of the semen used in the market. I think probably the most significant change that we see in the whole survey is the enormous lift in sex semen. And when I say enormous, that lift represents around about a 20% or 29% lift year on year. Now with sex semen at 671,000 units representing 38% of the total semen used in the dairy market. If you look back to those previous, the first 4 dots there along the bottom, we've gradually moved from probably around about 6 or 7% up towards 10%. But on the last 3 periods, we've seen significant growth, and it's really, I think, even similarly a message that potentially links back to the previous session as well. Okay, beef. What's happened in beef? Well, there's been a significant uptake in the usage of beef semen. In fact, the survey reports a 39% increase on beef year on year. And again, we'll talk a little bit with Chris about what are some of the drivers that have we've seen that take place. I think when we break it down into categories, now this is categories of beef semen, and as you can see, the blue on the right is the current year, the green is the on the left side is the previous year. Each and every category we've seen an increase in use of beef semen. 2 categories I want to particularly highlight to you is the is the first graph, or the first part of the second part of the graph, which is the imported beef on dairy, and what would it be, the fourth one or the fifth one along, which is the domestic beef on dairy. Both of those are representing around about 93,000 for imported beef and around 95,000 for domestic beef. The Australian dairy herd is now using over 180,000 units of beef semen. And again, links very much back to our previous session. Export, I guess you see a really nice upward trend there right up until 2020, and subsequently we see that start to fall down to only 241,000 units in the current year. I think that's really something that Rob Derksen would be keen to share a little bit of his insights in what's happening in that regard, or why we're experiencing some of that change in the recent 2 years. I'm going to go straight across to Chris, if I can. Chris, I guess I mentioned in the slide presentation there, there's been a 39% increase in beef usage. Just be keen to get some insights from yourself in terms of, what are the current drivers, and potentially, what are the future drivers?
Yeah, and I guess as the previous speakers and for the past 2 days, it's that beef on dairy that we're getting rid of that bobby beef. It's the sex semen on the top, beef on the bottom. So we've talked about that for 2 days, but I think the other significant increase is the beef on beef, because it's probably been a steady one for a long time, but because of the beef prices and bull prices around, for the past 18 months, you've probably had where bulls are averaging 20,000. So it's that commercial beef guy that hasn't done an AI program before, that's the increase in the beef on beef, I think, and that's probably the challenge going forward, is to keep those guys. As the bull prices soften, those guys that are new to AI, that have got in there and used it, we've got to encourage them to keep going with it. But I guess the beef on dairies, we've all explained the reasons why it's on the increase, and it's going to continue to increase, and that's, I guess that's...
So just with the your comment there, particularly around the beef on beef, I mean, we're aware that we're seeing some softening in beef prices right at the moment. Do you expect to see a change in the beef on beef usage within the current market?
Well, not if we've done a good job of it. As us, as I guess wholesalers and service providers out there, there's plenty of new people that have come in and haven't done AI before, these commercial guys, and that's where it'd be interesting to see that beef on beef, to break it down again, to see new people to the AI industry, because they're going to buy bulls and they're spending 20 grand on a bull. So it's a lot cheaper, and it's probably been never easier to sell that argument of AI versus the bull. So they're the new guys that have come in on the beef on beef. It's that commercial beef prices, and it is hard when we break down, when we might sell 500 units of beef to a reseller, and it's a commercial price. We don't know if that's going on dairy cows or on beef, to be honest. So that's where it is hard to break it down. But that's the challenge for us in the future, is to keep those guys doing AI programs that are new to AI.
So Chris, what would be your message, particularly to the service providers here? And I'm particularly talking about the beef on beef aspect. What would be your key message to them in terms of what the opportunity might be around their own business, and how they can potentially capture greater value out of beef genetics in what is predominantly a beef service, a dairy service industry?
I guess keep it simple and make it easy for the end user, who often you get commercial guys and they have a good season and they'll think about doing AI, but they won't do it because it's easier to put bulls out. If you have a couple of good seasons, they might think about it. And we have had a couple of good seasons. COVID's been pretty good for agriculture in Australia. We've had good seasons. So those commercial guys have looked at doing beef programs. So for the service providers, make it easy for them, and because they do see it as extra work. So if we can say, well, this is the program, this is what we're going to do, set it up, make it easy, and we'll come back and do it next year. And it's for those benefits of the shorter calving patterns and all that as well, using higher genetic bulls and those fixed time programs make management easier.
A question without notice, as there has been a couple already.
Yeah, I'm feeling that.
Yeah. Just interested, would you be interested in attempting to answer Graham Gillen's question? I'm not sure if you completely heard it. You were getting mic'd up at the back.
No, I
but,
didn't hear it.
but his question was really referring to the previous panel session, and really it was around, well, what is best? What are the genetics that we should be striving for beef on dairy usage? Do you have a commentary on that?
Yeah, I think it's something that they are doing in the US, where they have, for our Angus bulls, or Angus Simmental, doesn't matter, they have their EPDs, and we've all got way too many indexes now, so there's lots of indexes. That's my personal.
Thanks, mate.
But they do have a Angus on Holstein index and an Angus on Jersey index, and I think if we can use those bulls and get the end users to say, well, we'll pay extra for that dairy beef Jersey or Holstein if it's by a sire that we know has a really high index for Angus on Holstein or Angus on Jersey.
Thank you. Paul, a couple of questions for you. I mentioned we've seen a decrease in the total units utilised within the dairy market, but we've seen a huge increase in sex semen. I think I quoted 29% year on year, and now representing 38% of the total usage. I mean, what does your crystal ball look like?
Good question, Anthony. It is, as a representative of XT, it's certainly a great response, but it shows a couple of things. One, the confidence of using the technology and the improvements that have occurred in the technology to gain that confidence has been pretty important. I can't deny the export heifer market has certainly driven response. We look at the opportunities incorporating the genomics, and the better animals in the herd through genomics are utilising sex semen. The sustainability discussion is interesting because I'm an advocate that sustainability has been a long-term part of our industry, and it's been a motivation for our producers. So the elements like beef on dairy, etc., come into consideration, and the future with reference to male beef on dairy might be part of the sustainability models going forwards. I suppose to stimulate thought, and I think that's what these conferences are about, and I'll offer a hypothesis, for use of a better reference, that conventional semen may in fact be like Kodak film, and that it'll become a redundant technology. Now, do I know that? No, I don't, but the options that sex semen provide stimulates that thoughts and stimulates the options and opportunities going forward. Some we're apparent now, some we may become apparent in the future, and that's a remarkable aspect of that technology and how it's grown. Just another quick reference from a compliance perspective. I acknowledge Eamon from Cogent, who's visiting us at the moment, and conventional semen processing, and Eamon, you may correct me here, within Cogent is about 5% conventional semen. The rest is sex, and part of that motivation is a mandated motivation within the UK. So, there is an illustration of an option that may be apparent, and delightfully this technology gives the ability to react to that requirement.
Paul, just linking sex back to beef, I mean, what are you experiencing in ST in regards to where beef is heading in a sexed, form?
Yeah, and I need to reference the US because they have the supply chain integration system, so that gives us a good reference. They also don't have the export heifer market, so part of the operation within the US herds, from an ST perspective, 40% of their genetic decision is dairy, sexed female. and the balance becomes 60% becomes sex male. The male motivation there is a price signal, but those animals go through the calf ranch. They end up in the feedlots, and there is an efficiency element of a steer within feedlots. So that is like a primary motivator that sends a price signal down through that integrated system. And those signals will become, I think, more apparent when there is a sustainability element to it, from an efficiency of a male animal on a feedlot from a beef perspective, as one illustration of that.
Yeah, thanks. You answered that question particularly around sex, in context that at some point, we may see the end of conventional semen. I've just gone back to the graph now, which is sitting behind you. You might be able to see it in front of you, Paul, which sort of shows the pulling apart of the genomic proven and the daughter proven. At what point does the daughter proven bull fall into the redundant category?
Yeah.
Or does he?
I hesitate, but...
Well, very wise.
Yeah. But let's have a crack at it. That graph is an amazing illustration of the confidence in genomic technology from my first representation. What's the other elements that I get from that? We'll look traditionally at traditional progeny testing and 1,000 doses into the abyss at a fairly cheap rate that's randomly used to generate 80 to 100 daughters, of which 25% of those would be incorrectly identified, to get a minimum standard reliability of 63%, and I can get a 70% reliability genomic breeding value within a 3 to 5 week period. So I think it is a tremendous complement to the technology, and that gives us the confidence to utilise it, and then we utilise, and then the daughter performance will become apparent by the use of, they end up being daughter proven, and there will be some return to service size, which will be tremendous to see. And I think that's where this market survey will provide that handle on reactions to the marketplace. We may see a reaction to sex semen because of a reduction in price on export heifers, or the reduction of market. That's where this becomes really important. But this sort of graph gives us a really good insight in the confidence in genomics, and in essence, genomics is just another form of progeny test prior to daughter proving.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I'm just going to pick up a couple of questions that are up on Slido at the moment, and the first one was, the best genetics to use, with more of a comment, are whatever the buyers are buying, and that was very much, I think, linked to or related to the beef question that was put up earlier. So we'll leave that as a comment. Katrina, over the years, there's been a change, or has there been a change in or influence of polled genetics? And I might just make a comment on that first, and then I'm going to ask Chris to follow on with a comment as well. Part of the survey does actually look at or collate the polled usage. Again, the survey took a bit of a turn in the last 12 months to, I guess, reclassifying what polled meant. So the survey had traditionally been capturing heterozygous polled, and this last survey data that we captured was only the first year we had captured homozygous polled. So I've opted not to put that slide up. It actually does show a decrease if you compare it year on year, but it's quite seriously not a genuine comparative. So, but I guess more from an anecdotal position, Chris, comment, are we seeing more demand for polled genetics or less? What are you experiencing?
No, definitely more. And I think it's significant that you don't put that up, because now in Holsteins in particular, it's got to be a homo-polled bull. Really, it's just a single polled bull is... We used to use a homozygous polled bull and sacrifice whatever, whether it was type or fertility or whatever. But now I think the quality of the homozygous bulls are there, and that's where the Holstein have got to, because there's been so single bulls out there that now there's good quality homozygous bulls, and I guess that's where the Jerseys have probably got to try and catch up on that. They're not quite there yet.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Another question there from Terence. Has the decreased national dairy herd been accounted for with semen sales decrease? Short answer is no. The survey is put together just purely based on numbers of units that the semen supply companies have reported to the survey. Over to you now, Rob. I guess you would see the overarching piece, and I think one thing I want to emphasise, I mean, I asked Rob to be a part of this panel more so for his, his interaction with Ragtag, which is our ruminant group that liaise or advise government, and so he sits on that. But I guess the first point I wanted to make, Rob, you'd be somewhat disappointed to see the decline, over the last 3 years, moving down from a high of 2020 of, I think it was 424,000 units of semen down to the current year of being somewhere in the order of around about 220, I think it was. I haven't got that in front of me directly, but it was somewhere in that order. I mean, from a Ragtag perspective, because I'm going to ask you one more from a commercial perspective in a moment, what are the pieces of that puzzle that are either assisting or not assisting in where that's heading?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously disappointing to see the figures in the last year. I'd have to say, though, overall, as an industry, we ought to be disappointed with the figures we saw at the peak a few years ago. I think as an industry, we can do so much better in the export side of things. I attended a Agri-Gene meeting in Canberra about a week ago, and I think from memory, the figures that we as an industry put into the survey is around about 50% of what does get exported. So there's obviously a number of other players, smaller organisations that contribute. So, but it is a significant part, and I certainly applaud NHIA in putting the data together and having this available for industry, because internationally it's very, very hard to get some good stats of what's happening in other industries. But clearly the drop from the peak a few years ago is to do with China, and it's been a big player. In 2021, China imported for the first time over 10 million straws of semen, and 89% was that from the US and Canada, about 9% from Europe, and good old Australia was 1.4%. I was happy with 1.4%, I'd have to say, overall, but from Agri-Tag point of view, we've got some challenges with, and we talked, I think this morning, both Matt and Rob talked about collaboration. There needs to be very much collaboration within the industry for us to grow export, and that's collaboration with industry, with Department of Agriculture. Developing protocols is challenging, I'd have to say. My general comment is, and those that are here from Agri-Tag would know that you can ask about a protocol being developed, and it could be about 12 months to 2 years before you really get anything established. If you've got a distributor at the end of the day keen to sell your product, they well and truly go on. So that's a real challenge. And I'd have to say the other thing is collaboration with the live cattle exporters, because one of the differences we've had in this industry compared to, say, the US and Canada particularly, is in the US you've got a US LGE, which combines a number of different species. Live cattle export and semen are together. Canada is the same. They've got an organisation, CLGA, I think it is, and they also, number of species, and they've got live cattle and genetics together. So they have a single voice around the world in promoting their respective industries. For us, the quality of people we have within the industry, the 40-year anniversary we had the other night, the quality of the research that's being acknowledged obviously by a lot of international speakers, we should be doing so much better. So China's been the big key. I think the door's slightly open a little bit though with that, but we didn't need our Prime Minister a few years ago saying that we need to find the source of the pandemic, because I would have rathered him right behind Donald Trump in saying that would have been better. But so China's the key for that drop primarily. And your question about breed, Aussie Reds, you'll see that drop is we did sell a significant amount of Aussie Red semen to China, and obviously that stopped in about 18 months ago.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. What about opportunity? I mean, in terms of, fair enough. China had been a big part of those high years, but where is the key markets of opportunity for Australia to sell genetics?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm not sure many people in the room would be aware that the world market for bovine semen for dairy and beef is over 500 million straws of semen. 500 million. So that's a significant amount. A small share for us, I think, would be very important. And that's why we targeted China initially. We looked at the big markets. I think Australia, we've got some closer ties with India. So India is a market that I think has great potential, particularly for the Australian Jersey, I'd have to say. Having been and travelled in that country about 12 months ago, I think it has some terrific potential. So it could be a big market, and there's certainly there's very much a government support for developing other markets other than China. And India is obviously a key market, and obviously our Prime Minister's been there recently, and I think that'll happen. But, it's taken 12 months even to get a protocol somewhat established. It's not even there yet. So that's a big market. Pakistan is another one that there's been some recent work done. There's been about 4 shipments of semen go to Pakistan. In December of last year, about 1,400 Australian heifers went over. About 80 of those were Jersey, the rest Holstein. But the key with that was a fair percentage of them were selected on genetic merit. So, and something that a number of us saw in China a few years ago, where they just bought on white tails and, good colour markings and so forth. They're actually wanting better genetic merit animals. And I think that's really going to drive, sales into Pakistan. Yes, there are challenges, there's political challenges, there's currency challenges and so forth. But if those jerseys can perform well as we would expect them to in Pakistan, and India opens up, it could be enormous. I think we have the best jerseys in the world. So I think that's a real potential.
Thanks, Rob. Couple of questions on the slide. I'm just going to flick two now up. Peter Thurm, what is the trend of A2 bull usage? Again, that's one of the other pieces of information that the Semen survey does collect. We see a continual increase on A2 usage, and it'd be interesting to maybe get a comment from Paul whether it is around demand or simply the proliferation within the population. But the A2 usage on this year's survey actually was spot on 75% of the dairy semen units used. Paul, is it demand or is it simply proliferation of bulls?
I think it is proliferation of bulls. It's protection of market opportunity. In some ways, and not to generate any source of concern, but the A1 gene is nearly being treated as a commercial haplotype, a commercial recessive, reinforce that. So to protect our opportunity, I think, of all companies to get engagement of the genetics they present, they'll conservatively back the A22 genotype.
Paul, the next question, Batman's back. It's to you as well. Paul, what pressure will feed efficiency put on semen sales moving forward?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question, Batman. The signal on feed efficiency with regards to sustainability, with regards to accountability through the supply chain, right through to the major interface of retail. I think the supermarkets will start, specifying this carbon methane association, providing we can validate it against feed efficiency. And we've got the science, we've got the brains to be able to do that, and genetics will play a role in that. That feed efficiency will be a big role in that compliance. Well, let's advocate more. It'll be a huge role. So the validation of that role and the access to those genotypes from a feed efficiency will be nothing short of tremendous. And I offer that optimism. We can play a role. We will play a role in the compliances through the supply chain of both dairy and beef.
Thanks, Paul. Amy Cleggett, where do you see the future of bull selection?
There's a spare seat up here.
It's always one in every audience.
There is one in every audience. Sorry. Back to Amy's. Where do we see the future of bull selection? Will AI companies control this, especially giving the push for sexed-only option for some bulls? Who wants to have a crack at that? Do you want to go with that first, Chris? I can see you leaning forward.
I think that one's clearly for
We
Paul.
pushed him. We pushed him forward, so.
No, I do think that one where we're talking about bull selection and whether AI companies control what sire of sons are out there by making sex semen only bulls. It's a question for Paul, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. The data tools are amazing. The application of the data tools at a DNA level are still being discovered. The one thing I will say is that humans will always be involved, and that human is the final decision of what bull goes in and what bull doesn't go in. And so it's not data versus human. That human has the ability to look at the maternal line, to understanding its contribution, maybe to learn a lot more of some of the other genotypes that might be just a little below our radar, but we can utilise that genomic data to advance that maternal line, that genotype. So let's use the data, and let's not forget us humans, we play a role, and it's a very important role because it is actually the final decision.
Okay, we're nearly out of time, and we're about to wind up. I see Con's put up another one there. We're going to leave that one for Con to come back and present his paper on that at Herd 25. And we might take the other couple of questions offline. I guess just in finishing the session, I want to thank Paul, Chris and Rob for being available to participate in the session. I hope you gained some insight into I guess some of the trends that are happening with semen usage. I know that the semen supply companies find this information quite useful in terms of determining strategies for where their next lot of genetics come from and what type of genetics they need to fulfil the Australian market. So again, thank you for taking your time to listen with us today, and enjoy the last session. Thank you.
Off.